Hi, everyone, and welcome back to What a Week, another edition here. And, man, it was a busy one. So
cold season fist bump?
There we go, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, a little nasally this week. I'm sick and tired of everything going on now.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, that makes two of us.
Let's talk about the latest in the impeachment proceedings that are going on in the Senate, and this revelation that John Bolton's book is going to drop some pretty important, I guess, information or insight into the Ukraine investigation. And what do you think about this? Is this going to actually change anything? Because it seems like the Republicans, you might get 3, maybe a 4th to vote for new witnesses, but I don't know.
Well, full disclosure, we're taping this on Thursday.
Yeah.
And the vote apparently may occur on Friday. Mm-hmm. By the time you see it, it may have already occurred. Wouldn't surprise me if they stonewall. Yeah. And they vote not to call witnesses and just want to move on. My understanding from reporting I'm reading down in D.C. is that the president's made it clear he wanted this all wrapped up so he could take a victory lap on Tuesday night at the State of the Union address. But Bolton, look, they're trying now to trash Bolton as a turncoat, and Fox News is all over him. Come on, this guy's been an iconic figure of the hard right foreign policy establishment in this country for many years. And, you know, for him, I don't think that his confirmation that, yeah, absolutely, this was a quid pro quo, just as the president, as the impeachment count charges, I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. But to have it from an eyewitness, I mean, it's a whole nother level of confirmation. And I think, Chris, and I've been saying this all along, I still feel this way, regardless of the outcome, which is almost surely acquittal, this will reinforce the political reality we live in. For Trump supporters, it's yet another log on the fire of their outrage over the deep state and its efforts to overturn the results of the last election. That's how they see it. Nothing has changed. For the majority of the country that believes that the president is of low character, did something wrong here, and a narrow majority that believes he should be removed from it, it's going to make them feel even worse about the president's ethical standards and his conduct in office. So on we go.
On we go. One of the things I wanted to follow up on with this is, though, when you think about, we've been talking about these Republicans, especially who are in some of these swing states that could be vulnerable and they're up for re-election. Right. It seems like they're playing a short game, not a long game here, because if all this information is going to eventually come out anyways, most likely if the book drops, and, you know, that might be just the tip of what we end up finding out, this could be really devastating for some campaigns come November, don't you think?
You know, all I can say is they're apparently making a calculation that the risk of that happening, that they vote to acquit, they vote for no witnesses, and their position, which already is kind of ridiculous, what's a trial without eyewitnesses, is made to appear especially ridiculous, and that would in turn inflame the constituency in their states beyond where they are already. The risk of that, they're calculating, it appears, is not equal to the risk of having Donald Trump turn on you. Now, keep in mind, in most of these states, we're still in primary season, where a primary challenger can come up. Once you've secured your party's nomination, by the spring, later in the spring in most cases. Maybe it's a different story, but I'll tell you a real quick story. I know we got to move on, but I had a couple of sources in Washington who told me that the word is, if you're a Republican senator and you want to get your calls returned from the White House on business regarding your state, we need this funding, can you move it along, that kind of thing, you have to be seen on cable TV news kissing the president's you-know-what. And that he has to see you, and he has to see you multiple times, and then you're going to get your calls returned. Otherwise, no way. And that's a kind of a grim reality a lot of them are facing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Good insight. Let's talk about on the Democratic nomination side right now. So we've seen this kind of surge with Bernie lately, too. And heading into the Iowa caucuses and whatnot, we've got, looks like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders running pretty much neck and neck. What are your thoughts on this surge?
Well, look, I think it makes perfect sense. And you could look at it as a surge, or you could look at it as Bernie Sanders' support rising a little bit closer to the level that it was in 2016. Don't forget, he'd lost Iowa narrowly to Hillary Clinton, but then mopped up the floor with her in New Hampshire a week later. That was pretty much the peak of the Sanders campaign in 2016. But look, Bernie hasn't changed. His supporters are as loyal and rabid, if you will, no derogatory implication meant there, but as they ever were. Poll after poll shows his supporters are more strongly committed to him than any other candidate's supporters are to them, and that's a good place to be. And New Hampshire, of course, he's a neighboring state senator.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense. It makes sense that Bernie would be at or close to the top in those early state polls. However, he continues to have some serious structural problems given the context of this election cycle, and no two are ever alike. They're like snowflakes, Chris. And those are weak support among women, weak support among older voters, and very weak support among moderates. And as we get past Iowa and New Hampshire, which tend to skew more liberal, younger voters have more of an impact, and we get into places like South Carolina and the Super Tuesday states, this election's going to be decided by moderates, by women of color, and that's another area where Bernie lags. So even if he does take both Iowa and New Hampshire, this thing isn't over by a long shot.
All right. Gonna have to keep watching that one too.
Okay, you bet.
And let's bring it back here home. We talked last week a little bit about the potential budget shortfall, and one of the things we've been talking about is casinos and the revenue obviously falling short, really not gaining any traction here, and then lottery sales down. What is going on?
Well, I think we missed the boat in terms of the salad days of gambling revenue. It was an awfully juicy pot for a long, long time, but there's a glut in the regional market. You know, we know all about Connecticut and Rhode Island, and now New Hampshire and Rhode Island now are into sports betting, and we're still arguing about it up on Beacon Hill. And interestingly enough, the payoff, or the early returns from New Hampshire and Rhode Island are not necessarily up to expectations. You know, people can sit at home now and go on the internet and wager to their heart's content. There's a glut of options on the market, and that leads to a law of diminishing returns. I just recorded this morning an interview with Speaker DeLeo, that'll air Sunday morning at 8:30 on the BZ Morning News. And he's, you know, still hopefully optimistic that those revenues will be revived, but there were a lot of budget assumptions made based on a windfall from casino gaming, and even the casino in Everett, which even I thought was going to be a license to print money, is lagging way behind what they said it would be. You know, that's the way the marketplace works, and I think we placed our bets too late to really cash in.
All right, sounds good, John. I always appreciate your insight. It's
Likewise,
great to have you.
Nurse that cold, will you?
I will hopefully be over it for next week. We'll be back on track and good to go.
Big glass of bourbon, break a couple of eggs in it, some talcum powder, then throw that in the trash and go to bed, okay?
That sounds good. That's the plan for tonight,
All
John.
right.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time here on What a Week.